Hello and welcome to Niche References, where I yap about my niche interests so that I don't annoy my friends and family with them. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to be yapping about my favorite and least favorite puzzles in each of the 34 games in the Nancy Drew series. The title does say best and worst, but that's just a cleaner, snappier wording. I am not the objective authority on this by any means. I just have opinions, and I'm going to share them. As always, this is being posted to both Spotify and YouTube, something I do plan to expand going forward, but for now, links to either are in the description if you want to check out the other platform. Very quickly up front, to clarify what counts and what does not, I am specifically discussing puzzles here. I will have separate episodes on mini games and or chores together separately, not sure. There's a bit of a gray area as to what counts as a puzzle because some chores are puzzles and some puzzles are chores. But I'm counting puzzles as anything where I have to solve something. For me, chores that wouldn't count as puzzles are like fetch quests that you're assigned, such as collecting items, taking pictures, stuff like that. For mini games, these encompass pretty much every cooking game and any activity that you can stop and do repeatedly for funsies whenever you want. I also recognize that those two categories also overlap. It's complicated and vague. The YouTuber Snuggly also did a video like this with her own favorite and least favorite puzzles, and I'm essentially using the same criteria as her. So I will go ahead and leave her video down in the description if you want to check it out. So I'm going to run through all the games in order, naming my favorite and least favorite puzzle from each. For some of these, I will name multiple puzzles, but I will try to always narrow it down to one singular favorite and least favorite puzzle for each game. Lastly, before we dive in, I do have to note that in order to discuss the puzzles, there will inevitably be minor spoilers, but they will be limited to the puzzle at hand. There won't be any major plot or culprit spoilers in this video for any of the games. Starting with Secrets Can Kill Remastered, since I haven't played the original Secrets Can Kill, so none of the puzzles in Secrets Can Kill Remastered are fantastic, but I think that my favorite is actually the chemistry puzzle, which I know is not a popular opinion. It's a puzzle that relies on the accumulation of information throughout the game, which is something I usually do gravitate toward for favorites. It's not a great one in the series by far, there are many better ones, but I don't think this is quite as bad as the hatred of it would make it seem. Least favorite puzzle, again, there's not really that much to choose from, but I think I'm gonna go with the ladle. Does the ladle count? Placing the ladle under the pipe to stop the restaurant from exploding? It's just an awful concept all around. Please don't fix your gas leaks by shoving a ladle in place and crossing your fingers. That's how the 4th season of Community happens, my friends. Moving on to Stay Tuned for Danger, once again, there aren't really that many good options for favorite puzzle, but I think I have to go with Breaking Into the Audio Booth. It barely counts, but it is a code, and I do enjoy codes, so I'm going to count that. Least favorite is an easy pick. It's the bomb. Technically, there's a clue to solve this, but I don't know how anyone discovered that. It basically ends up playing out as guess and check, and then you die and have to do a second chance, and die again and have to do a second chance. And that's if you're lucky enough to have not soft-locked yourself. Message in a Haunted Mansion, my favorite puzzle is the Chinese characters puzzle on the safe. It's another of those puzzles where you synthesize information throughout the game, and I think it's one of the most successful ones in the series. The poem in Nancy's room is one of the first things you see in the game, and it really helps to alert your awareness to looking out for the Chinese characters, and it ties into the history of the Golden Gardenia. As for my least favorite puzzle here, there aren't really any that are terrible, but my least favorite is the maze on Lewis's computer. I never really enjoy a maze, whether it's like a digital maze on a computer or having to navigate woods or something like that. This one can at least be hacked by pressing M, but it's still my least favorite thing in this game. I know a lot of people don't like the tangram because it's kind of glitchy, but I don't mind it. Next up, Treasure in the Royal Tower, an absolute favorite for me, but one that doesn't have a ton of true puzzles. For my favorite, it's perhaps a bit iffy to count this as a puzzle, but solving how to get into the library is my favorite part of the game. And it involves solving a bit of an environmental puzzle, so I'm counting it. Figuring out the elevator shaft and then the air ducts and trying to avoid Dexter, the whole thing is a really cool puzzle. For my least favorite, again, this is perhaps stretching my own definition a smidge, but I'm going with fixing the circuit breaker. It is technically a chore, but it's not a straightforward chore. You do have to figure out which switch is the correct one. And it's another puzzle like the bomb that ends up just being guess and check, which we will see going forward continues to be one of my least favorite things in puzzles. Moving on to the final scene, for my favorite puzzle, I don't count getting into the magician's room in general as a puzzle because you're basically just following a clear set of instructions. But what does count as a puzzle is that sliding rabbit puzzle that's on the door of the magician's room, and that one is my favorite one in this game. I tend to refer to these as rush hour style puzzles because it's an IRL game that exists that I played as a kid, and I always enjoy puzzles like this. So as we established in my ranking of the games, I don't love the gameplay in this one, and my least favorite puzzle in the game is the end game puzzle with the keys. A lot of people love the end game sequence in this game, and I don't get it. First of all, the puzzle is just guessing and checking with keys, which is both annoying and difficult because they're technically different colors, but they're not wildly different colors. They're very easy to confuse with each other. But then also the game puts you on a timer and gives you a letter to read that includes vital plot information that you're supposed to read and take in while on a timer to do a puzzle as well. It's a simple puzzle, yes, but it's a frustrating one, and it's guess and check, and I hate guess and check. Moving on to Secret of the Scarlet Hand, my favorite puzzle in this one is a bit of a hot take. It's the audio puzzle. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I really enjoyed doing it. It's one of those moments where you actually have to take physical notes. You feel like you're doing some actual detective work. I quite enjoyed it. My least favorite puzzle in the game has to be the basketball-esque game that's in the pyramid on the second level. Say it with me, it's yet another guess and check, and you have to do it correctly multiple times in a row, so you're guessing and checking, you finally get it correct, and then you guess and check some more, finally get it correct. It's so annoying. For Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, there aren't a ton of puzzles in this one that I really love, but for my favorite, I am going to go with the spigots and the speakeasy. This one and a couple of other puzzles in the game feel like it's just the same thing repeated over and over again with the dogs' names and the Roman numerals and the letters, but I think this is the best version of it in the game, so it's my choice. As for my least favorite puzzle in this game, most of my least favorite parts of the game fall under chores, so we'll have to wait for another day to complain about taking bird pictures and collecting critters. But of the actual puzzles in the game, I think my least favorite is a really stupid one. It's the one right near the end where you have to figure out the water level to open the door. It's not like it's a difficult puzzle, but the first time I did this one, I massively overthought it and didn't realize that the game told you essentially when you got it correct. So I just kept guessing and checking again because I didn't realize that I hadn't gotten it. Like I said, kind of a stupid one, but I don't enjoy it. The Haunted Carousel, one of my least favorite games in the series, and also I don't really like many of the puzzles in this game, so choosing a favorite was a struggle. In the end, I landed on Swimmer's Itch for my favorite puzzle, which is another rush hour style puzzle where you're trying to get the swimmer out and you have to move obstacles out of the way. These puzzles are kind of simple, they're kind of repetitive, we see them a lot throughout the series, but they're always decent. Choosing a least favorite was also difficult because I have a wealth of options, but for some reason, I just really hate making the dowel rod. I can't explain why I hate it so much, but I do. Only on this most recent replay did I find the clue on how to make it. I'd been essentially guessing and checking this entire time on how to make it, which in hindsight might actually explain why I hate it so much, because so far, almost all of my least favorite puzzles have been guess and check. I promise that will change going forward, but there's a lot of guess and check in these early games. And again, technically, the dowel rod is not guess and check, but the clue as to how to solve it was hidden well enough that I never saw it until this most recent replay. Moving on to Danger on Deception Island. This one I was torn on my favorite puzzle between the Royal Flush puzzle and organizing the books, but in the end, I do think I'm going to land on organizing the books. I generally tend to enjoy these kind of like organization puzzles because there's something really satisfying about fitting everything in there perfectly. Least favorite puzzle is kind of tricky, and some people might not count this one, but for me, picking the correct light bulb for the lighthouse is really tedious. It is another example of guess and check, which we've established I don't like, and it's only kind of borderline a puzzle, but it's not a chore. No one assigns it to us. We have to figure it out on our own. We do have to solve something, so that's why I'm counting it. If you don't want to count that one, dishonorable mention to getting the coordinates for Hilda's second message, because I always miscount something on that, and it's a very frustrating experience for me. Next up is The Secret of Shadow Ranch, and finally we have a game with a wealth of puzzles to choose from my favorite. In the end, I do think I'm going to choose navigating that final maze in the cliff dwellings as my favorite puzzle. Usually I'm not a big fan of mazes, but this one you have to decipher the code to navigate it, and then also you have to find the different pieces to unlock the door, and it helps in the final culprit confrontation, which is a confrontation I really enjoy. It just combines a lot of really cool aspects into one big, really excellent in-game puzzle. As for my least favorite in this one, I have a lot that I wish I could choose, but I can't. We all know the chores in this one suck, and I also hate the fetch quest. I couldn't decide if the slot game in the ghost town counted as a puzzle or not, so I am going to skip over that one, but it is my least favorite thing in this game. In the end, going for just a strict puzzle, I'm gonna have to go with constructing the bridle. It's just kind of annoying and not intuitive at all as to where to place the pieces, and why do we need to put together a bridle? It should already be put together for the random city girl who's going to the ranch. Curse of Blackmore Manor is another excellent puzzle game, but for my favorite puzzle, I do think I have to go with making the forge key. It's another excellent end-game puzzle that synthesizes a lot of information that you've obtained throughout the game, and it directly ties into the actual mystery with the Penvillain family line. My least favorite puzzle for this game is also a no-brainer because I hate this one so much. It's the frog puzzle in the conservatory. It sucks so much. So here's the thing. There's a fairy tale book in Nancy's room that tells you how to solve this puzzle, except the puzzle is randomly generated every time, so even if you follow the book, it's not a guarantee that you will actually succeed at the puzzle. It's still, let's say it together, guess and check. In my opinion, that's such terrible puzzle design, but on top of that, the actual worst part of this is the noise that the alligator or crocodile or whatever it is makes when it catches you. So every time you lose the puzzle, not only are you losing, but you have to hear this absolutely horrible sound. I had to mute the game last time I played this and did this puzzle because it's so awful. Bad, bad, bad. I hate this puzzle so much, and I also always forget how to trigger it, so it's just one of my least favorite things ever in the series. Moving on to another puzzle game that I actually quite like, which is Secret of the Old Clock. My favorite puzzle in this one, not surprisingly for me, it's a logic puzzle. It's the pies. It's a pretty simple logic puzzle, but it's a logic puzzle nonetheless, and those are some of my favorite puzzles. My least favorite puzzle in this one is guessing Topham's brainwaves. It's not terrible on Junior Detective, but on Senior Detective there are so many nuances to what he says that it's really hard to keep track of, and I don't enjoy it. Side note, I am counting mini golf as a mini game instead of a puzzle. It's kind of borderline, but even if it were a puzzle, this would not be my least favorite in the game. I would rather play mini golf on Senior Detective than do Topham's brainwaves on Senior Detective. It's so much worse. I know a lot of people hate mini golf. I'm not super bothered by it. Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. There are so many options for favorite puzzle in this game. It is one of my favorite puzzle games, but I do have to choose the doll puzzle. I love the doll puzzle so much. It's such a great synthesis of information puzzle, and it's really cleverly done with all the little quirks that each doll has. Also, since this is such a great puzzle game, I do need to give an extra shout out to my other favorite puzzle in this game, which is unlocking the grate in the sleeper car. That one's another one that requires a pretty decent synthesis of information between Camille's crypt and her book of samples. It's really cool. It's more intricate than you think it's going to be, and I always really enjoy that one. I'm always surprised by how much I enjoy that one. For least favorite, I don't really dislike any puzzles in this game, but I do have a couple of options. Although I really enjoy Leaping Lizards as a game, I don't love trying to beat Tino at it because I'm not particularly good at it. It usually takes me 4 or 5 tries to actually beat him. But if I do have to choose just one, my least favorite puzzle is probably placing the stones correctly in Jake's machine. Some of the clues on the placement are kind of vague, and also there are a couple of stones that can easily be confused with each other. This is one of my pet peeves in the games, where the physical representation of an item and how the item is drawn on like a piece of paper or a book or something don't really match up that well, and therefore confuse the whole puzzle process. Side note, I'm really unsure if the mini games in Buell's shop should count as puzzles, because I don't know if you can play them multiple times after you beat them, but I also don't like those either, especially the horse race. Again, guess and check. But at the end of the day, my actual least favorite that I will choose is placing the stones correctly in the machine. Danger by design. Despite my dislike of this game, there are a few puzzles that I do actually really enjoy, and I think my favorite of those is the T puzzle. It's a pretty straightforward logic puzzle, which is something I enjoy, and it's right there at the beginning of the game, so I can do the logic puzzle and then leave the game and not play the rest of it. Choosing a least favorite puzzle for Danger by Design is truly diabolical. There are so many options. There are some famously bad puzzles in this game. That said, there is one puzzle in this game that I think is possibly the most poorly designed puzzle in the entire series, and that is the final decoding puzzle to get out of the room that you're locked in the Mulan. I noticed this in my most recent replay of the game, and Snuggly also called it out in her video that she made similar to this one a few months ago. But in Junior Detective, when you're solving that final decoding puzzle, they literally have to spell out how to solve the puzzle in the task list because it is so convoluted and not intuitive. The bullet in the task list is so long and descriptive that you have to scroll down the task list to read the whole explanation for the puzzle. That's how unintuitive the people who made this game thought the puzzle was, that they had to put all of that into the actual task list for junior detectives. It's wild. That said, dishonorable mention to the squirrel scarer, which is so unintuitive. Why would I ever think to make that if not prompted by the game? I don't know. From some of the worst puzzles in these games to my least favorite game in the series, Creature of Kapu Cave. This game barely has any puzzles, let alone any good puzzles, but for my favorite, I think I'm gonna go with fixing the solar panel. It's one of those puzzles that's like kind of Sudoku adjacent, but more like adding the rows and the columns together. I usually enjoy Sudoku adjacent puzzles and Sudoku puzzles, so this is fine. It's probably my least favorite version of it, but it's fine. For my least favorite puzzle in the game, it's gotta go to the floor is lava puzzle at the end. It just makes no sense and it takes me ages to solve it. Another dishonorable mention for the stealth sequence in the lab, because I really don't like stealth sequences. So for my favorite puzzle in White Wolf, I want to choose the first time that you play Fox and Geese. This one's borderline because it is kind of a mini game, but it's also a puzzle because I do think you have to beat Bill at Fox and Geese to progress the game. In the end, I think I'm counting it as a mini game, but if you want to count it as a puzzle, I won't complain. In that case, the first time beating him in Fox and Geese would be my favorite puzzle in the game. The one that I ended up going with isn't much better in terms of mini game versus puzzle. It's clearing the ice. It's basically Minesweeper. You do have to do it multiple times, but it's kind of a chore, kind of a mini game. I don't know. The puzzles and mini games in this one get a little funky. So many choices for least favorite in this one. Tino's survey is really awful, but to be honest, the puzzle that made me the most angry in this game was escaping the sauna. The game barely gives you enough time to look at the puzzle, let alone solve the puzzle, And I can't even do the puzzle fast enough when looking at the solution to the puzzle. That's how little time you're given to solve this. It's absurd. I normally really like pipe puzzles like this, but this version sucks. For Legend of the Crystal Skull, I'm hesitant to choose this one, but I am gonna go ahead and go with the Gravestone Hunt. I do have some qualms with it. I do think that some of the puns are a smidge too ambiguous, especially when you have so many pages of names to go through. I always miss one or two. But in the end, I do think this is a cool puzzle. I think it's a fun one, even if I do occasionally get a little annoyed with the puns. If I seem very lukewarm on my favorite puzzle in this game, it's because this game has a lot of puzzles I don't love, and several that I just actively dislike. At the end of the day though, choosing a least favorite puzzle in this game was very easy because there are few puzzles I hate more than the Rube Goldberg machine in Zeke's shop. I never hear anyone else saying that they hate this puzzle, so it must just be a me thing, but I can never make sense of this one, and it always ends up just turning into guess and check, which, as we've established, I have little patience for. I struggle to even find the starting point of the whole machine. It's just a very frustrating experience for me all around, and I have never legitimately solved this puzzle on my own. I always try, and I always end up just giving up and resorting to a walkthrough. For Phantom of Venice, my favorite puzzle is one that a lot of people tend to dislike, I think, but I actually enjoy doing the Tesserae. It's essentially just an organization puzzle, which is really satisfying to me. I also quite like the Italian puzzle with the police, but the Tesserae is definitely my favorite. Phantom of Venice is yet another game with several puzzles I dislike, so I do have a lot of options for least favorite here. I don't love the stealth sequence to get the blue sapphire stone, whatever it is. I don't like the pigeon puzzle either, but at the end of the day, my least favorite does have to go to the water level puzzle. I never get anywhere with this one. I have tried doing it without cheats, and it just does not work. It does not make sense in my brain. From one of my least favorite puzzle games to one of my favorite puzzle games, next up is The Haunting of Castle Malloy. For my favorite puzzle, this one has two absolute banger logic puzzles with the seating chart and the dollhouse. The dollhouse is really fun because you get to do it multiple times, but I think I do have to give it to the seating chart because of all the fun callbacks, and I think it's a slightly more fun logic puzzle than the dollhouse. Now for my least favorite puzzle in The Haunting of Castle Malloy. This is one where I feel like most people have the same answer, and that is not the one I'm going to give. Most of the things I dislike in this game are either mini games or chores. So for my least favorite puzzle in this one, I think I'm gonna go with a really, really stupid one, which is the printing press. It's not a difficult puzzle at all. I just always get confused with the mechanics of it, and I accidentally throw away the paper I'm supposed to be using instead of reusing it. It's a stupid, actually fairly easy puzzle in the grand scheme of the game, which is one of the harder games in the series. I just really don't like it because the mechanics always confuse me. I forget how it works. It's a frustrating experience for me. And yes, I'm well aware that there are other puzzles in this game that a lot of people hate. I don't hate them. Speaking of things we hate, Ransom of the Seven Ships. So for my favorite puzzle here, if Color Sudoku were not at the bottom of the ocean, that would easily be my favorite pick. I did still almost choose it because if you just pause the game and you solve it, it's actually fun because it's Sudoku but with colors, which is fun to me for some reason, more fun than normal Sudoku. But in the end, I didn't go with Color Sudoku. I actually chose the logic puzzle at the end of the game with the different locks that you have to choose between. The end game of this one has some pretty gnarly puzzles, and this is one that's actually pretty fun and not super difficult. Speaking of gnarly end game puzzles in this game, my least favorite puzzle is, of course, the hourglasses. Universally a nightmare to all of us. I eventually solved it, but at what cost? Dishonorable mention goes to one of the early puzzles in the game where you're digging up the treasure book. I got really stuck on that one. Warnings at Waverly Academy. Like I mentioned in my ranking of the games, this is one of my favorite games, but not a favorite puzzle game for me. So choosing a favorite was actually pretty difficult. I think I'm gonna have to go with the logic puzzle sorting the seniors on the website, especially because it does play into the story and the characters, because you can get answers from the characters themselves to help with the logic puzzle. A close second, though, is the piano puzzle. This series has several piano puzzles, and some of them kind of suck. This one's pretty decent. And as a musician, I feel like I have to choose one of the musical puzzles at some point, so honorable mention to the piano, I guess. Choosing a least favorite one for this one is interesting. I think silverware is often a universal pick, but although I do think there are some very obvious design flaws in the puzzle, it's one that I can solve without spoilers, so I don't totally hate it. Same goes for following the squirrel up the tree. Again, it's annoying but not unsolvable. I think for me personally, the puzzle that I like the least is the stars on the wall in the basement. It's just not very intuitive to me at all, and even though I've played this game many times, I still manage to mess this one up almost every time, even though I technically know how it's supposed to be solved. Moving on to Trail of the Twister, there are so many to choose from for my favorite because I really like the puzzles in this game, but for my favorite, I am going to go ahead and choose the siren placement puzzle. It can be just a little bit finicky, but it's one that I really enjoy. As for my least favorite, genuinely, this was one of the hardest ones to choose a least favorite for, because despite this game's flaws, Trail of the Twister doesn't really have a dud puzzle, in my opinion. If I have to choose, I guess I'm going to go with the gear puzzle for the car, but that's just mostly because it's unnecessary and tedious. Of all of the puzzles I've named as my least favorites in each of these games, this one is nowhere near the bottom of that list. For Shadow at the Water's Edge, like Waverly Academy, it's one of my favorite games, but not a favorite puzzle game for me. So this is a smidge tricky. I do actually really like Monster Sudoku. I know that's a hot take, but at the end of the day, I do have to go with Bento for this one. It's a logic puzzle. I love a good logic puzzle, and this is probably one of the best logic puzzles in the series. For least favorite, I think most people go straight to Monster Nonogram, which is totally fair, but I have bigger beef with the puzzle immediately after that. Picture it, you've just spent the better part of an hour trying to solve a Monster Nonogram just to immediately be pushed in a bath and have to cut ropes to survive. This is just not a puzzle that I was ever going to be able to solve without a spoiler, and thankfully now I have the solution memorized, but it's not one that I enjoy at all. Any aspect in these games where I'm on a timer, or I can see my temperature going down, or I can see my breath going down, I hate it. I don't enjoy that ever at all. Moving on to Captive Curse, which is one of my favorite puzzle games, but not because there's like a big standout puzzle, but because all of the puzzles are just really solid across the board. So this one was tricky for favorite. I ended up choosing the decoding insecurity, but that's a little bit shaky. I also really like the one to break into Carl's safe. I also like the one to break into security in the first place, but I think I am going to stick with decoding insecurity. That one's probably my favorite. For least favorite, again, there aren't really any that really stand out. Based on my parameters, I don't think I can count the mazy labyrinth parts of the map as puzzles, like the forest or the tunnels. If I could, those would easily be my choices because everything else in this game is pretty solid. Given my parameters, I do think I have to choose Don't Wake Renata, aka moving the stuff around in her bag so that she doesn't wake up. It's really finicky, it's kind of annoying, it takes several tries for me to get it right. Also, why does this woman carry around one single bell in her bag? What kind of monster is she? For Alibi and Ashes, choosing a favorite puzzle is difficult because most of the game is police detective work, not puzzles. But the puzzles that are in the game are mostly ones that I enjoy. I think my favorite might be the triangles to unlock the filing cabinet. It makes absolutely no sense in context, but it's probably the most fun one to solve. The code on the computer is kind of fun because it's Sudoku-esque. Same with the wire puzzle, but both of those are pretty simple and take like 5 seconds to solve, so triangles it is. Least favorite puzzle here has to be the audio levels. There's no rhyme or reason to puzzling it out. It's simply guess and check, my least favorite thing in the world. Oof, Tomb of the Lost Queen. I have to choose a favorite puzzle for Tomb of the Lost Queen, and I'm not allowed to choose the Sinet board game. Decoding? Just decoding. The one where you have to get the names of the sons and daughters of Nefertari is pretty solid, I guess. So many options for least favorite puzzle in this game. I'm not going to touch the Floor is Lava endgame puzzle because it's essentially the same as Creature of Kapu Cave. However, right before that one, there's a puzzle where you have to match the Egyptian gods to their heads, and I'm sure there's a solution to that somewhere within the game, but at that point of the game, I'm just so puzzled out every time that I don't care. I just want to brute force my way through, which ends up in me guessing and checking again, and I believe dying over and over again. It's a very frustrating puzzle for me. Shocking to absolutely no one, my favorite puzzle in Deadly Device has nothing to do with science. It's the book puzzle. It's kind of like the Tombstone Hunt puzzles where you're given a list of things to find, but it's also a synthesis of information before you can just jump in and solve it. Honorable mention to the logic puzzle that gets you into the Tesla control room. For my least favorite puzzle, I really hate escaping the vents. I think we've established that I hate any sort of maze puzzle and timed puzzles. I do think that's iffy as a puzzle though, so if we're not counting that one, I do have to go with the 3D printing. I'm actually usually pretty good at these like 3D model puzzles. We see them a few times in the series, but this one for some reason I kept messing up over and over again. It was not a fun time. Choosing a favorite puzzle for Ghost of Thornton Hall is kind of like the Captive Curse, where there's just a lot of really solid puzzles, none of which really stand out, but all of which are good. I think my favorite is the plus and minuses puzzle that pops up twice in the game. It's a bit nonogram-esque, which I do typically enjoy. I just replayed this one, so I have a fairly lengthy list of ones I enjoyed. Some of those are the briefcase, the stained glass window, tangrams, and also, yes, the clocks. I'm always surprised when people hate the clocks. I think it's pretty straightforward. My hack for solving it is set them all to midnight, let them run, then wherever they stop, mirror that across the y-axis and run them again. Boom, they're all gonna land on midnight. But yeah, at the end of the day, my actual choice is the pluses and minuses. My least favorite one here is actually surprising to me. Like I said, I just replayed this one, and the one that I liked the least was the epitaph hunt. I just think the way that this is executed is very unintuitive to me. Counting the name on the stone as part of the epitaph, I guess, technically is correct, but it always feels weird to me and throws me off. I never want to count the name, I want to just skip to the other words on the stone. I enjoy the accumulation of information aspect of it, but the actual logistics of it just are not intuitive to me. Next up is The Silent Spy, which is one of my favorite games in the series and one with a lot of puzzles I really love. But that said, my choice for favorite was really obvious because it's one of my favorite puzzles in the whole series. It's the endgame puzzle with the tartan drives. Not pulling the tartan drives, but the not quite Sudoku puzzle that you have to do with those drives. You can only have one color per row, per column, and per grouping, and it's a really fun puzzle that's kind of Sudoku-esque, and I always love those. As for my least favorite puzzle, I guess I have to go with the Jabberwock poem. I usually love decoding, but for some reason this one just doesn't work for me. I think it just largely depends on guessing correctly, and we've established how I feel about guessing. For the Shattered Medallion, puzzles are the only semi-redeeming factor of this game, and yet I'm struggling to come up with the favorite. I think my favorite here probably has to be the battleship, spaceship, nonogram puzzle that's under the waterfall. It's kind of poorly explained, but we've established I like these kind of puzzles, so this one's decent. As for my least favorite, it has to be the end game weird alien relic puzzle. It's just poorly designed and not explained at all, which is really frustrating because I do think it has the makings of an excellent endgame puzzle, but the lack of explanation ruined it, which I guess shouldn't be surprising given what game we're dealing with here. Labyrinth of Lies is an interesting one because there are a lot of puzzles that I enjoy in this game, but I find a lot of them poorly explained as well. That said, choosing my favorite was easy because I love the Seeds puzzle so much. Poorly timed, sure, but the puzzle itself is so good. It's kind of like a Minesweeper type logic puzzle, and I really enjoy that. Not just my favorite one in this game, one of my top 5 possibly in the entire series. Choosing a least favorite is where this gets weird because so many of them are just poorly explained. But once I understood how they functioned, I liked a lot of them. I think it has to come down to either the sliding letter tile puzzle or the ferryman's staff. Those are the two that I think are the most unclear. I think personally I'm gonna have to go with the ferryman's staff puzzle. That one, the images are just unclear enough that it's vague, and I don't enjoy that. The sliding letter tile puzzle is poorly designed, but once you understand how it works, it's not that bad, in my opinion. Sea of Darkness is an excellent puzzle game, so it's hard to choose just one as my favorite. I absolutely love both of the logic puzzles at Magnus's cabin. I love a logic puzzle, we've established this. But another thing that I absolutely love is when these games do a little twist on Sudoku. So my favorite puzzle in this game is in fact Triangle Sudoku. Unfortunately, despite some absolute banger puzzles in this game, there are a few duds. I really don't like the Elements puzzle on Soren's tablet. It does not compute in my brain, but my least favorite puzzle absolutely has to be the lion coin puzzle. I fiddled with that stupid thing for ages and then finally gave up and consulted a walkthrough. No thank you. Impossible. I now apparently am being told that I have to choose a favorite puzzle in Midnight in Salem. I don't have one? Everything I enjoy in this game is more of a mini game, like Johnny Cakes, like the herbal tea stuff. If I have to choose, I guess it's probably fitting the drawers into the correct spots, I guess. As for my least favorite puzzle, like all the rest of them, all of them, if I have to choose one, it's probably trying to navigate out of the tunnels. But the floor inlay is also pretty bad. But tunnels. And finally, the most recent game in the series, Mystery of the Seven Keys. We're still in the early days here, but I do think my favorite puzzle, as I mentioned in my review, is probably the inlaid logic puzzle in Leon's office. It's not without flaws. I do recognize that it's finicky and it only accepts one correct answer, even though there are multiple correct answers, but I do enjoy it. It's a logic puzzle. Need I explain more? Secondary answer is probably unlocking the door near the end game with the 7 keys. That one's pretty alright as well. For my least favorite puzzle, unlocking Vladena's safe is really heinous. It is really horribly explained. I still don't know how to solve it. Dishonorable mention to all of the puzzles dealing with the model astronomical clock in the cafe. Those were diabolical as well. So that was a doozy of a list, but we're finally through. Those are my favorite and least favorite puzzles in each game in the series. Personally, I really like this style of video for discussing the series because I take ranking lists way too seriously. If I had tried to rank like my top 10 or 15 favorite and least favorite puzzles in the series, it would take ages to come up with that list. When I make lists like that, I feel the need to be extremely thorough, and maybe one day I will make a list like that, but for now, I enjoy this like more casual way of talking about the puzzles in the series. I do eventually want to do a similar episode like this for the characters as well, but that's probably a little bit down the line. Mini games, chores, and cooking games are also high on my list of Nancy Drew topics to yap about, so if you have an opinion on where within all of those things you would like me to go next, please let me know. That said, coming up next overall though, I do plan to do a ranking of all of the American seasons of The Mole very soon, so be on the lookout for that. That will probably be my next episode. Several of my niches flow in and out seasonally, and July is often Danganronpa season for me because I first played all 3 games in that series in July, and this year is the 5-year anniversary of that, so I'm really feeling myself getting into the Danganronpa mood. So when the dust settles on The Mole, Danganronpa content might be next on the horizon. So if any of that I just talked about sounds interesting to you, please go ahead and subscribe on whichever platform you're currently listening on. And if you want to see me enthuse over my niches in real time and get updates on the podcast, please follow me on Instagram. Links are all down in the description, so please give me a follow and come along with me as I make some niche references.